Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 most important principles around game design. And hold up, if you're not a designer, there's still plenty of reason for you to stay tuned because these are things that are coming from someone who is not a game designer and coming from someone who has, a pedigree of something like 200 games that your fingers have been over the course of your career.
Something like that.
This is Travis Chance, the lead designer at CMON. Did I get the title right there?
Senior designer at CMON.
Senior designer at CMON.
Yeah.
Senior just means you're old.
It's an indication of my age. It's like the rings on a tree. It's like carbon dating.
You shift like 20 years up.
When I got 43, they just started adding senior to it.
That makes sense.
I get a discount at Denny's.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good for you. All right, can you establish your pedigree just a little bit? Because as far as I exist, I'm Quackalope. I have done little to no development on games, but playtested a ton of prototypes, and I think I give pretty decent feedback.
You do.
And some of the games that have incorporated our feedback, which has been one of the most fun things I've seen over the course of our career in this hobby space, have arguably done better because they listen to us a bit. Not that we're right, but we're at least experienced in the hobby space. Then from your end.
So from my end, I've been doing this for about 10 years. I'm kind of an odd duck in that I've worked in the publishing side. I've done creative direction and art direction, a lot of. I've done some kind of guerrilla marketing stuff. I've had a lot of titles over the years, but I started off as I designed a game, and then I thought I could do better, and I self-published a game with a couple friends of mine called Heroes Wanted many moons ago.
Okay.
That company went on to put out we made 8 games together, one of which was Aeon's End, which is a really successful brand.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yeah. Another one is Kodama, which has got a bunch of supplementary products, more of like a cute kind of lighter midweight family game.
Yep.
Yeah. I worked at Indie Boards and Cards. I was the president of Colossal Games.
Western Legends is the title that spun from
that was the first project. That game was stuck in development limbo for years, and they just randomly showed it to me at Matago, and they're like, hey, do you think you could do something with this? And I took it on and worked with the designer. He's a first-time designer, and that game is that's probably one of the bigger ones I've worked on. So I'm over at CMON now, which is great. I've been there for about a year and a half.
Cool.
Work with the very talented Chris Ham, my lead developer, and we're working on all kinds of cool stuff that you will see in 2023.
Can you spoil anything?
I can't.
No?
Yeah.
Can I spoil anything? Am I allowed to?
No.
The disappointing thing is he didn't actually come to spoil anything around CMON. The exciting thing is he came because a project you've been working on for the last 2 years is coming to fruition. So in front of us here, and we're not going to be diving into this in the video, but if you're watching, you deserve to know, you're currently working on launching the very first game through
Trayz, which is Trayz Lab.
Trayz is the company where you open up a box in literally any company from any company in the board game industry, and you go, oh wow, that insert's beautiful. Oh wow, those components are great. Oh, I love how it comes out and sets on the table and allows me to interact with the pieces that I'm playing with. They probably have their name stamped somewhere alongside that. They make the best inserts across the board, and I think they're one of the only brands that people actually know and recognize for doing that, like in the hobby space. They're publishing a game called Forsaken. It's going to be their first Kickstarter launch. It's a project we've worked on for the last 2 years.
In between Colossal and CMON.
It is a open world, sci-fi, post-apocalyptic, Western style exploration with asymmetric characters that have their own narrative through lines, a lot of world-changing and global catastrophizing abilities, some cool dice rolling kind of mitigation and mechanics that go to like gathering resources and moving around the board. And we've been playing it. Now, in front of us here, we have a run to... What was the store we ran to?
Office Depot.
Yeah, we have a literally run to Office Depot and print some stuff, prototype in front of us, because they're getting ready to actually put in the game trays order for the final production pieces. So this is not ready for the camera, and if you're watching, you're getting a sneak peek at something you don't know about yet. But soon, very soon, we're going to be talking about one of the coolest open world board game integrations in the space. Now, I am doing some work with you guys on that. That's one of the reasons you're up here.
Yeah, that's why we came up
We're
here,
getting
just to show
prepared for some aggressively heavy produced content, some gameplay content, hopefully you haven't seen before from us. So, with that being said, let's start talking about game design.
Oh,
and do you have a way that you approached these principles? Because both of us are going to be. I'm curious to see. We've not talked about this, and I'm curious to see where we overlap and where we diverge. Because I'm coming from a very innocent, but kind of direct approach as someone that playtests and sees games almost at their finish line, and the mistakes that I see people make. Whereas you're coming at it from someone who's had a hand in creating from the ground up a ton of projects.
I think you'd probably be surprised at it, because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to say has a lot to do more with personal philosophy.
Cool.
And
mine is straight mechanics advice, so we are going to be always include drafting is my number one. That's just period just drafting. You want to start off? What's your methodology?
So, I think the very first thing that you need to know if you're making a game is it's a very long process.
Okay.
So, for example, this game is 2 years, and sometimes things click, and sometimes they don't. At CMON, we have very long lead time, so I've been working on games, last year that aren't going to see the light of day until 2023, 2024. Okay. And you just have to accept that. There's a lot of people that are in a hurry, and I don't think, time is the crucible through which we all move. And the beautiful thing about time is if you have time, that's the opportunity for you to realize things. So if you try to truncate that and you try to I've seen people do this where I just want my Kickstarter to launch. I just want the game. And they try to push something out into the world before it's really ready. The thing I always say is your game is ready when you start to hate it. When you start playing it and you're like, oh my God, I never want to play this again. That's when it's ready. So I think patience is the number one virtue I would... Yeah, I don't want to rank these things, but for someone who's getting this for the first time, it's a long, long process. There's a lot of hands involved. There's a lot of... You're going to be handing your baby off to numerous people down the assembly line all the way until it finally ends up in a box.
Cool. I like that. My first one here, and in no particular order, just the way that I came up with them, is going to be copy everything. Literally copy everything. It's the best advice I can give to people that are trying to start any type of creative or artistic endeavor. Now, that doesn't mean you publish what you copy. It doesn't mean you steal stuff from people. But when I approach YouTube, for instance, I look at who's done it good and who's done it well and who I admire and who I enjoy. And then I start thinking about how I can iterate upon that methodology, how I can do what they've just done. When I look at, because I've dabbled in the design space, not producing anything worth mentioning, but just the thought process behind if I was going to make a game one day. And my approach is heavily, what game do I love? And what systems do I love? And what games do those systems in a way that I love? Like drafting, like deck building, like card play. What makes those titles fun for me? And how can I steal 80% of that from games that I adore and innovate on about 20% of that? Now again, it does not mean you rip, copy, reskin, and just add new artwork to titles that already exist. That's not what I'm advocating for. But when you're just starting to learn how to design, or you're trying to reinvent the wheel on something that exists, like trick-taking as a core system, I really think you should play, explore, and understand the genre that you're playing in.
Know your heroes.
Yeah, so copy stuff. Start by copying stuff. Start by just... Don't try to reinvent the wheel, because it's almost impossible to do so.
Right.
That's my thought. Yeah, sure.
The next one.
Do you agree or disagree? Is it terrible advice?
No, I think that's great. There's a comic book author I love named Warren Ellis, and one of his big philosophies is there's so many good stories that you don't need to try to make anything new. Just work with tropes and distort the tropes, right? Yeah. So he's got
Copy
like 20. He's got like 20 characters that are very clearly Superman origin story, which is some twist, some weird, crazy thing. And it's instantly recognizable, you know?
Yeah.
And there's also, you know, and I didn't put this down, but this is something, I was at a convention recently, and Shane from Grey Fox and I were talking about this. And this is something he said to me a long time ago when he saw a game of mine. He was just like, it's too innovative. And he's like, and at the time I was just like,
what do you mean?
Goose.
How dare you?
But he's right. And I agree with this now, years later. You need something familiar for people to grab onto. If you play something that's just totally alien, there's no common ground. There's no starting point.
I like sitting down and knowing 80% of your game.
That's what's beautiful about deck building, right?
Yeah.
Because when you say deck building, you say, is it like Dominion or is it like Ascension?
Yeah.
And then you go, what's the difference? What's the hook? And that's it. It's a meta language. And then you can basically know the game from there, which is amazing. I love that about that.
And if you know them really well, you can say which expansion does it incorporate.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
My next one,
Dun, 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 dun.
Perseverance.
Perseverance. That is a lovely game I haven't tried yet. I'm really excited about it, though.
It looks cool.
It's gorgeous.
It does look nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a trial and error process. It's a lot of work. Square peg through a round hole doesn't really work. I mean, I say this, I got in a lot of trouble for saying this a long time ago. I did like a Rhoda, the Gamma board asked me to write as like a publisher designer hybrid for this like series of articles they did, and my thing was titled "The World Doesn't Need Your Mediocre Game."
No,
Yeah.
no. Can I title the video that? Can I title this video that?
The world doesn't need your mediocre game.
Instead of top 10, like I'm gonna put that at the thumbnail of this. I swear, and it's his fault. You're discovering this as you watch this. YouTube title is Top 10 Game Design Principles.
Sure.
And the thumbnail is The World Does Not Need Your Mediocre Game.
I had another notable. I made a game.
That's brutal.
It's true though.
I know.
We were saying it earlier. There's so many good games, but there's so few great games.
Sure.
And when you have literally every Tuesday somewhere between like 30 to 150 games launching on Kickstarter, and that's not counting what comes out in retail, there's just not really an impetus to make something that's okay, that's good. Now, you could do that for your own edification. You could say, I'm going to make this game because I want to do this. And as we talked about earlier, making a game, and then if you're trying to actually create the game and run the company that's publishing the game, that's a whole other...
Yeah.
You don't want to be the guy making the okay game.
No.
Right? And that's, there's objectivity, right? Like, every person thinks they're a good driver, and they have good taste in music and all this.
So how does Perseverance fit into The World Doesn't Need Your mediocre game?
Keep trying until you find what's great.
Until you get the good stuff?
Yeah. Like,
And
don't just
scrap the bad
assume,
stuff?
don't assume your first try is your
It's good.
your best try. Because it's not going to be.
Yeah.
It's just not, you know. I could think of a million examples, bad analogies, but, you know. I'll give you one. So I started running, and it took me a year to be able to run a mile.
Sure.
Right? And I ran a mile, and then the next day I ran 3 miles.
Sure.
Right? I didn't think that was possible, but it was a big deal. And I think it's the same thing. Now, this is probably a bad analogy because I'm saying like within a 1 day time span, I tripled my expectation. But you'll know it when you get there. You just have to keep trying. Like it's a long process. Not every idea is good. You're going to have a lot of false starts. You're going to have things that there's going to be something like this little nugget of something you love in a game, and everything around it is garbage.
Yeah.
And you have to find a way to extrapolate that and then transplant it into something that works.
Principle number 2 for me is ideas are cheap. Like obsessively cheap. Like your idea isn't the thing that's valuable.
That's mean too. Both of our twos were mean.
It is mean.
Both of our twos are mean.
So
they're true.
I heard a policy that Google has, and maybe it was just a metaphor, but I heard rumors that the operational staff at Google, the people like high up on the food chain that really run the groundwork of what Google does, have a Google document that's just full of ideas. You get an idea, you go in and you just draft it in, right? You just lock it in. And to everyone in the world, that Google document is worth absolutely nothing. Because ideas are completely worthless. There's so many of them, and there's so many great ones. And just because you're inspired off a game or believe in something that you've decided to create or think no one's ever mashed together, under the water adventure with deep space mining, with a cacophony of, vocal battles. I don't know. I'm just trying to say things. Like, just because you came up with it doesn't mean that it's the new great thing. And your idea has absolutely no value until you put about 2 years worth of work into it. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you hit the right nail on the head, right? Like Harry Potter was written on a napkin, right? Like we hear those stories. And that makes everyone think like, oh, the thing I just thought of, that has so much value as well. And it's like, no, if you'd been able to buy the napkin that franchise was written on, it would not have just turned into a $7,800 billion company. That's not how that works. That idea was valuable only and solely because the person who created it had it in their hand and then executed on it. Your idea, as good as it might be, means absolutely nothing. This is going well.
Right. All right. The next one. Are we ready for the next one?
I am ready for the next one.
I think be humble.
Ooh.
Okay. First of all, there are a lot of people who are doing this or trying to do this. And there are some people who are really amazing at it. Some people who are really excellent that just have been doing this for a long time. And that they're innovators, pioneers, champions, whatever you want to call them. I think it's very easy to believe that you've invented a new way to slice bread and that it's better than everyone else's. But the reality is, just kind of like you said, is there's probably 100 other people who've thought of the thing you've thought of.
Sure.
And I also think that in this particular community, it's a very small community, being cavalier does not go over well. It will leave a distinctly bad taste in people's mouths.
Yeah.
So, you need to be decent, you need to be kind, and you need to have decorum. And I think that goes a long way.
Decent game, honestly.
Decorum?
Yeah.
I haven't played it.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that like the social element of this, the networking, the community element of this industry is very important. And coming in here like you thinking you're hot stuff and you're better than everyone else, especially if you've never done anything, is not a good look.
I'm all right though. Like,
you're great.
I'm pretty good.
You're pretty great.
My ideas are really great.
You have good ideas.
Thank you.
Actually do have good ideas.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that in a sarcastic way. Like you have impressed me today. But no, I think that's true, and I that's something I've struggled with actually in my career. Like, I was a fringe musician before all this, and I played weird, wild, crazy, strange music, and I always tried to kind of live in a world that was adjacent to what was expected. And what I realized is you cannot come into this world and this industry and expect people to glom onto the things that you're making if they're strange or not digestible, etc. So I don't know. I think, be humble. I think that's really important. I think that'll go a long way. People will remember that. People will remember if you're truly, just decent, Yeah.
Number 3 for me. Number 3 is going to be the best advice you can get when playtesting or doing playtesting sessions for people. And again, this is going to be a lesson I heard from designers talking about people playtesting their games. The best advice, the advice you should be asking for is not what mechanics don't work, where do you think it falls apart, what breaks, is the math okay? Like, get a developer to do all that. What you should be asking for and the advice you should be giving is what was fun, what was not fun. When I played your game, I had fun doing this. When I played your game, I did not have fun doing this. And when you do playtesting with people, you should listen for what was fun.
My game was fun.
What was fun, what was not fun. I think distilling it down to such a simple little area helps you identify what parts of your game are working and are not working. And the nuance of design and the nuance of what will and will not unbalance your game, the people who are playtesting don't know. Again, that's what a good quality developer is for. But when it comes down to just the single 2, 3, 4 play sessions that you're doing with individuals, you should really listen closely to that, because multiple people will identify the same things that aren't working for them. And if you try to listen to the nuance of their criticism, you'll miss the big overlying picture. When we go to combat, I'm just not having fun anymore. When I roll the dice, it's just not interesting, right? Or I love the powers and abilities you just gave me. It felt so cool to be able to play 3 cards at the same time and just blast a hole through the wall. Well, awesome. Like, there's a part of the game that's doing well, that's acting right. So that's my advice when it comes to listening for, giving, and receiving playtesting advice.
That sucks because I was going to say something similar for my next one.
We're connecting.
Listen, ask questions.
It's not quite the same, though.
Listen. So you need to listen to people. I've been very bad at this. As you know, I'm very charming.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're handsome.
It's the cough.
And handsome, honestly.
Yeah, handsome. Yeah. Slightly handsome.
We've established you were a smoker in your past life.
Yeah, smoker mom named Terry.
Yeah.
It's very easy to influence playtesters. It's an interesting position. You're putting people in to play something, and you're asking them to give you candid feedback, and you'll get different feedback based off what type of playtester you have, right? So game designers oftentimes will look a bit, kind of be a little more incisive. They'll start to impose like, well, if I would have done this game, this is what I've done. Where a person who's just a person who plays games, who doesn't normally play test, might just say, like, they might just be happy to have seen something or think that that's really special, or maybe they'll be a little more delicate, right? So this is something Eric Lang actually told me, is like, when you play, you watch. Just watch how people are reacting. Watch the emotion, watch how people, what they're doing, why they're doing, if they're enjoying what they're doing, if they're doing one thing more than another.
I've had designers tell me how I should be feeling.
Or really bad.
Like hand you cards and be like, now this is one of the most exciting parts of the game.
Sure.
And I'm how are you getting information from me?
Yeah, creator bias, right? It happens. I mean, it really does. I have to restrain myself. The co-designer of this particular game, Mike, is very, very good. And he gets on to me. He's like, you just need to listen. Just like, don't try to influence people's opinions. And so I write this for him because I think that is a very true statement. And I think also just observing, like if you notice patterns, a lot of times people don't have the ability to articulate specific things in a game to the extent that another, like you would maybe express because you're more familiar with games, or I would express because I'm more familiar with games. So like the proof is sometimes in the pudding, like, okay, this is happening a lot, or I noticed when they did this every time people were like wincing or they were distracted or whatever. So there's a lot of evidence in just behavior, watching behavior.
My next one is going to be mentorship. I think people undervalue how important it is to always have someone available and there who can guide you, who you trust to tell you the truth and tell you straight, and let you know when you're making mistakes. And that could be in your personal life, could be in your career, could be in your design. And there's an interesting thing. So we were listening to a rabbi here in the University Heights community earlier this week that was talking about the concept of mentorship. And in the Jewish community, you're supposed to take for yourself a rabbi, take for yourself a teacher. That's what the term means, right? And at a certain point, there's rabbis that, like teachers, that no longer really have anyone that's recognized as being better than them or above them, but they're still obligated to take for themselves a teacher. And so what they do is they find someone they can trust who isn't more knowledgeable or more sophisticated than they are. And they recognize that there's still so much value to be gained from that. And so at any stage in your career, you always have something to be gained from a valuable lesson or a valuable word of advice coming from someone you trust. And that's going to be, and that's going to be true in the design space. Reach out to people who you admire in the space, who created games that you love, who are willing to open their door and spend time with you, invest back in them, and vice versa. And then along with that, be a mentor and also act as a mentoree to the people that need your advice. Like, you should have these relationships where you're feeding back and forth into one another, and supporting the next thing. You do not have to be an island. You do not have to be a silo. And I think while some amazing things come from people who are those things, there's a lot of suffering and a lot of pain that goes along with being that. And you do not have to be to create amazing work.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I agree. I mean, I owe a lot to...
Me.
To you. No, I owe a lot to people like Zev.
Yeah.
Dan DiLorenzo, Kirk Covert.
Yeah.
Like the people who came before me who took the time to talk to me and give me respect even though I knew nothing and I had nothing.
Yeah.
It meant a lot.
I mean, throughout the whole journey as a content creator, we've got tons of people that have, invested in us from the beginning and thought we were doing something cool and, like, encouraged us when the world fell apart. And
there's nothing greater, right?
So,
I mean...
That's awesome.
It's a beautiful thing. All right, and now for a mechanical. You ready?
I like it. I'm ready. Whew.
Spreadsheet.
Ooh, dirty word.
No.
Yes.
You know how many designers don't do spreadsheets?
I wouldn't. I'm so bad at these. All right, I'm going to shut up. Oh, man.
You have to.
Oh, I hate
you. You have to like spreadsheets. It's such a good data capture.
Yeah.
You need to start getting your ideas down in a way that's not just a mess. And like I've seen a lot of designers, they'll just kind of focus a lot on the prototype files, and they'll be like, oh, that's where the verbiage lives. That's where the content lives. No. You need something, especially if you work with other publishers, you need something that you hand over to the publisher and you say,
interesting.
Here's the master document, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so getting comfortable using spreadsheets and really using that to track, and like even going so far as to track notes. I'm pretty bad about this, but this is something that I endeavor to do, which is to track versions. Like, hey, this card has changed every single time we've done an effects level pass.
So something's doing
this
weird.
Card has changed every single time. So it clearly isn't working.
Yeah.
I think that spreadsheets are massively valuable tools, and they're something that I'm surprised not every designer uses. So that's not like a very long-winded answer, but spreadsheets.
It's just hard. I mean, like, I'm a creative. I'm not artistic, for one. Artistic I define as someone who can pull images out of their head and create that. But I am creative, meaning I can use the arts of creativity to do things, to wield them,
sure.
Right? But that doesn't overlap with being organized, and in data or analytical. And sometimes it does, but yeah, I mean, that's good advice.
Do I strike you as a particularly organized person?
I find you very attractive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So exactly. So I use spreadsheets as a way to try to combat that. Deficit.
My team has started trying to use Notion to catalog what's coming in, what's going out, what we're obligated to. Like I'm trying.
So much stuff gets lost too.
It is such a learning lesson, though.
Yeah, I mean, like just handwriting stuff or like saying, "Oh, I'll remember." Not a good.
This is my first attempt to be organized.
That's great, though. At least
you
have something.
I'm trying.
There's an artifact of the ideas that you have, and that's something.
Mechanics and story. I am a massive advocate of flavor text, of theme, of bridging the gap between a game that's designed mechanically and then has a story pasted over it versus a game that's designed from the story ground up. And I know I just described a Euro mechanics engine with a story pasted on. I get that that's a definition of a category of board game. I still think the best Euros to me are games that feel like at some point they realized what the theme was,
sure,
and still catered or designed to the story that it's telling. I have Euro games that are so evocative and so merged with the narrative adventure that I feel like I'm going through this experience while I play them. I think people undercut the quality of their game by identifying story too early, and I think people undercut the quality of their game by identifying story too late. I think it needs to come in towards a middle stage and start informing the mechanics and the design choices in a really integral way. You start on mechanics elements. Really cool puzzle. Does it work? Is it a fun math game? Is it balanced? What's the functionality, right? That's not always the case, but I think a lot of times it starts somewhere around there. Or if you're starting with theme, you're starting with theme from a very abstracted, what mechanic would exist here? If I'm a lumber mill, how does that translate into a mechanic in a board game, right? But then I think they need to merge and not just be pasted, because the design choices and the things that to me stand out as broken in a game are always things that just go counter the story that the game is trying to tell me. And those are identifiable beforehand, especially if you playtest with the right people. And while not everyone recognizes that disconnect in a game, more often than not, people still feel some ambient dislike of a mechanic that breaks a thematic integration.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do, especially in games that are not, maybe like the design space is smaller, thematically shallow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with that.
I get it. I don't know. It's super important to me. And probably not as important to, like, if you ask Board Game Co., but it's super important to me. Yeah, who cares about his opinion?
Pishon.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know how I can top spreadsheets. Wow.
It's a good one, man. It's a powerful one.
I mean, this is a generic term, but kill your darlings. I think people get.
Do you know why it's a generic term?
Because it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a lot of generic terms.
It's a truism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think people can get really hung up. I mean, I have a game that I have been sitting on since 2015. I've shown it to every publisher under the sun. I've had it signed something like 6 times, and
Really?
then in development, they're just like, we don't know what to do with this. And the reality is there's a mechanism in there that's really compelling, but it's not. I had a publisher say the best thing. This game is really smart. It is in no way fun. And it's absolutely true. They're like, it's not fun. Like, this is unique.
And they don't know how to make it
It's
fun.
smart, and there's no way to make this fun.
Wow.
And so that's just an idea I had that I made that I put time into, and
Cool.
It didn't pan out.
Yeah.
So,
Does part of you still want it to exist? Because I'm going to be honest with you. No one needs your mediocre games.
That's right. Well, that's hard, right? That's
Yeah.
like when you know that, when you find out that you've made
one of those. Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm a werewolf. So I've thought about, there's the core mechanism is really neat, and I've thought about trying
stealing that.
like displacing it into something else, but it just never works because the idea in and of itself is a game.
Yeah.
So to say like, oh, I'm gonna take a game and make that an element of a game is it's
interesting.
So I just had to accept that that's something that is dead. Like, I came up with this neat idea that I literally think 7 publishers had it and looked at it, all the way up to bigger ones, and it was no one could articulate what was wrong except for this one person. They're just, it's not fun. It's not fun.
It's just
and I'm
not
like,
fun.
You're right.
That supports my thing of like, listen to the like, what's fun, what's not. I don't know.
Well, I stopped putting time into it there. Instead of trying to say, I'm going to try to push the square peg, I was just like, okay, I've tried this. It's not working. So
you gotta stab Caesar in the back. That actually bridges into a very interesting point that I have, which is a point around Eric Roos, designer of Spirit Island. I went up and spent an afternoon with him. I have a full interview that I never actually published that I should go back and edit. And I think it's a really interesting way to design games. And for me, it's something I carried with me. It might not work for everyone, but his approach was to break the game down into the sub-mechanics that existed. Break it down into the area control. Break it down into the card play. Break it down into the asymmetric factions. And figure out a small game that functions around that. Like, is this asymmetric faction fun to play as? Is it fun to cycle these cards, generate resources, and just do the churn? And once that's fun, great. Move over to the area control. Is this area control puzzle hard and challenging and escalates in a way that is tactical and fun without the asymmetry mixed in? And then once you have all those disparate parts, he kind of brings them together and goes like, great, now how do these link together? How does this fun part merge with this fun part? How does this balanced part merge with this balanced part? And it might not be the right way to design a game, but I think there's a principle there that at least I would try to utilize, which is if you're designing something big and ambitious, break it down into accessible units and parts that you can understand, and then build up from that. It's like trying to swallow the entire elephant on a single day. You got to start with the butt first and just hunk off a piece,
Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah,
you can eat a whole elephant.
A whole elephant's butt, apparently.
Yeah. You just got to start piece by piece. Is that a reasonable thing?
Yeah, I think
it's a weird, it's a piece of advice from a designer I respect, but
I mean, that's not my process. I could understand how that is someone else's process, though. Yeah.
Cool.
You ready for the next one?
We can be. Yeah.
I mean, I do you want to talk more about that?
No, I don't think so.
No, that's interesting. No, I'm thinking about what you said. I mean, I'm very like. My process is, I'll get an idea, and it's weird because I'll kind of get an idea, and I'll get it in my head, and I'll do this thing where I kind of think about it for like a week
Chew
or
on
two.
it for a bit, yeah.
And I don't talk about it. A lot of what I do, I say "what if" a lot. I know that's one thing. Those are the words I say the most. So, what if we did this? What if that? And so what I'll do is I'll sit around and I'll think about it, and then there'll come a day where I pull a piece of paper out, and I'll start writing or drawing. And sometimes it's really dumb. Like it'll just be like, I'm gonna draw a rectangle, and that's my play mat, and then I'll draw like a circle, a couple circles, and I'll go, oh, those are the tokens that go there, and then and then I'll step away from that. And then I'll come back, and then I'll take that, Caves of Lascaux caveman painting that I have in front of me, and then I'll just make like a bunch of components, and enough that I can get it to the table, like the old fail fast, methodology. But that's my thing is like I have to kind of sit and I think about it, and I'm like. It's almost like I'm procrastinating, like,
I get that, the productive procrastination.
Yeah, but then I make up for it.
No, I really relate to that.
Yeah. And then it's just like, idea waterfall just comes out of nowhere. Yeah, so that's my process.
I love daydreaming. I love spending a day, like 17 hours where you're basically sleeping. But I wake up I sleep for 8 hours, and then I wake up for an hour, and I'm just in this in-between state of, like, just thinking about what I want to do and the creative process, and just falling in and out of sleep.
I think about games all day. It's like I think about them all day. Like, It's always running in the background. The guy, Chris, that works for me, he goes, he says, he's like, a lot of people think they're multitaskers, and they're not. And he goes, and you actually are a multitasker. The problem is, instead of doing 2 or 3 things, you do 7. So, and one of them is just, I'm always, and then whenever I'm ready to show him, because he's like a totem of sanity for me. So when I show him, and then if he starts to go, oh, that's interesting, and then I know that there's something to bite into there. So yeah, I agree. That's cool.
I do the same thing with content creation, with what we're doing on the channel, right? It's just everything is functioned around that.
Yeah.
Like,
you seem like you have a lot of intention for what you're doing. I kind of have this like weird thing where I get like an itch and I refuse to scratch it until it becomes so bad that I have to,
Okay. Is it my turn? Was that... No, that is your turn.
Oh, was?
It's your turn.
We're so deep.
What's your next one?
Oh, I'm just pretending that I'm not looking at my notes. Oh!
Why pretend? I'm clearly sitting here looking at my notes.
Because I've been doing this for a long time and I have to pretend like I just know these answers off the top.
I have 40,000 subscribers.
I don't have any.
Yeah.
I've got like...
Do you know how I got
80
them
followers
all?
on Instagram.
I got them all from cue cards and notes.
Well...
you should be unapologetic about it.
I think you need to know what your objective is. And I think you need to know who you're making this game for.
Can I just go ahead and give you one that I just...
Sure.
Like, that's on there? Recognize that there's different player types. Now continue with your point. Like, I think these merge. I think they're next to each other.
So, it's okay to make something for yourself. It really is. There's something I struggle with a lot in this. I love what I do. I genuinely, I am so grateful that I get to do this every day. I struggle with a couple things. I struggle with, does the world really need another board game?
Mediocre game.
Yeah.
You already established that point. Yeah.
does it need another thing in a box? Like when there's so many, like, I mean, like I'm staring off camera here and there's just games everywhere. And my garage is like overflowing with games and my house has games in it. It's crazy. And I don't even end up playing like most of them. Like I'll open them up and look at them and like read the rule book or kind of admire the components. But I've definitely made things just because I wanted to make them and I wanted them to exist. And there wasn't an audience. So a really funny, this is another Eric Lang moment, was I made this game called Path of Light and Shadow, and I showed it to him, and he goes, pretty cool. You made a deck building game where you don't get to choose your cards, and dudes on a map game where everyone only has one dude. Don't know if anybody wants that game. And then he said something like, congratulations, Jeff Goldblum, and I was like, huh? And he's like, you got Jurassic Park syndrome. You're so busy trying to figure out if you can make something, you didn't stop and ask yourself if you should. And he was right. I mean, and that game, interestingly enough, it came out. It took years for anyone to even like that game. Like, it had a little uptick last year, but I made something that was so. Nick and I made something that was so different and weird that it was almost unrelatable, right? Like, and it was like, who the hell wants this? Like, people who play area control games for like miniatures aren't going to be satisfied with just one guy representing their whole army, right? People who play deck builders aren't going to want to manage. I mean, I literally had like vagabonds and stuff like going. They're like you're just getting like weird people into your deck, and you're like, what do I do with it? Like all the cards are good, but you're like, I don't want half of these things. So yeah, it was different. No one thought of it, but there's probably a reason no one made that game. Like, you know, I was the dummy who insisted it be made. So I think you have to know who you're making a game for, and sometimes it's okay to just make a game for yourself. It's okay to have a passion project, but don't go into that with the expectation that it's going to, you know, set the world on fire. Not everyone gets to be Gloomhaven.
And for me, it's to recognize that there's different player types is important, because as you get feedback and start directing your game to a point, you have to identify, like, is this for mass market retail? Is this for my grandmother? Is this so that my 6-year-old son can play with me? Is this for the heavy deck building gamer that has every expansion to Dominion and genuinely knows how to mix them in? Because there's 7 of those people that exist. And those people like games. They really do.
Sure.
They're never going to like your game more than Dominion, but they like games.
Sure, so know your audience, right?
Yeah, it's just one of those things where as you start receiving feedback, as you start designing, as you start like processing through criticism, you have to recognize, is this the person that I made the game for? And like you said, that could be yourself. And I've seen, like, Feudum is a great example of a game that I feel like was made for the designer. And it is amazing and, immaculate, and takes an hour to teach, and is one of the, if not the most weird, complicated area control Euro hybrids I've ever seen on the board, with amazing artwork and great components. And it was made for the professor that made it. And I love that game, and I understand why most people never play it. Like, I understand why I almost never play it. Like,
yeah, sure.
It's just a cool project. So
back to me.
Back to you. I've been scribbling extra things down here, by the way, so I'm going to have more than you probably.
Oh boy. Oh, do your homework.
Okay. What do you mean?
Well, I think it's very easy for people to think that they're doing something that no one else has done. So I'll tell you, here's some funny things. I have had in my career probably 20 times someone came up to me with this really clever gleam in their eyes, and they go, so listen, I got this idea, right? It's a game. It's dwarves. It's all dwarves.
Oh.
And they are either mining resources, or they're braiding their beards, or they drink beer. And it's funny because dwarves aren't as cool as like elves or other things.
No, that's cool.
So it's kind of like the bad news bears of the fantasy races. And I'm like, cool. I've seen this game. I've seen this game like 18 times, and I've said no 18 times. And I've had that happen a bunch of times where there's certain genres of games, and I don't know why so many people are compelled to make these. That's a thematic choice, obviously, but I've seen mechanisms that just crop up, and almost every single time someone thinks that they're the first person who's done it, and I'm just like, well, not only have I seen this game like 20 times
for sure,
there's also like 15 games like this in the current marketplace. And no, that's not like that at all. Because my game is about samurais. And I'm like,
your thematics does not change your mechanics.
yeah. It's exactly, right? So I think like you need to know the market space you're competing in.
Yeah.
I mean, and doing your homework extends to all kinds of things like cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
Like knowing who you're up against, right? Paying attention to other creators to see if like, you don't want to prestige the illusionist moment where like those, I'm talking about those two random movies came out at the same time. They're like Victorian magicians.
Basically the same.
Yeah, no, Prestige is amazing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's
if you
like,
watch the trailer to them, you're confused.
Sure, it's a Victorian magicians. Like what? A Victorian illusionist or whatever. That's weird that they both came out around the same time. So I think like understanding and paying attention, being a part of the community, putting your ear to the ground, making sure you're aware of what's out there, because that could make or break you, right?
Yeah.
By the same logic, you could use information to tailor a game that's on trend, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, oh crap, like engine
Well, I
builders
think you
are
see with like Cole Worley and designs like PAX Premier that came from a PhD education in that cultural study, right? You can see some amazing games come from really knowing the source material of the thing that you're working with. I think that's great advice. Whatever it is you're diving into, whether if it's fiction, you need research on the outer realm of what you've explored, and if it's nonfiction, you really need to understand what you're talking about.
It's very easy to just do this and run in a straight line, and then when you get to where you think you want to be, you're surrounded by, oh my God, why does everyone have 20
You were running in a
games?
straight line as well?
Yeah.
I like where he ended up.
You also have a dwarf beard braiding trick taking game. Like, who would have thought?
Don't apologize.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. And what do I mean? Because there's definitely some situations where apologies are worthwhile and mandatory, but in the application of game design and receiving and getting feedback and criticism, or your game just not being right for some people, at a certain point, once you've identified all the things we've gone through, the type of game you love, what you're copying in it, what you're not copying in it, how you're being innovative, what your theme is going to be, you've done your research, and you've broken it down to like, I'm making a game for me, or I'm making a game for, my grandmother. At that point, when your game doesn't fit for someone, that's okay. The game, I didn't make the game for you. I made the game for me, and I love my game, and I don't need to feel guilty about that, and I don't need to apologize about that. And there's a chance your game won't be successful. Maybe that's not the goal of making your game. I know a few people that just want to see their game on the table. They just wanted that to be created. And I think you should be proud of that, and excited about that, and justifiably, confident in the fact that you did something that a lot of people have an idea of doing and then didn't ever execute on. So once you got a thing that you can show people, listen to feedback, take advice, take criticism, do your best to distill it to the best thing it can possibly be, and then once it is genuinely there, stop apologizing for it. Just let people know that it is what it is, and maybe the market will love it, and maybe it won't, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about your headspace and what you're willing to let in.
I got a mean one.
Okay.
You ready?
I love it. This is a mean one. You're deep breathing before it. I love that.
So, I think it's important to remember that just because, we've kind of touched on this, but just because you want to make something doesn't mean that you should. So there's a reason things like Game Crafter exist, right? And there's a difference in making like, I've got an idea for a game. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna play with my friends. I'm gonna make like 3 copies and give it to my close friends. Versus, I want to run a campaign and ask people for money. Owner. Exactly. And so there's a massive disconnect between being a publisher and being a designer.
Sure.
And I've seen a lot of people that they had a good game, but they were not prepared to run a company or to take people's money. And the moment you take someone's money, you take a stranger's money, you are no longer a game designer first. You are an entrepreneur first. And it is not...
It's not the same thing.
It's not glamorous. It's very difficult. It's mired in logistical details and money. And so...
And it's not necessarily fun.
I mean, I've seen people who have done stuff like...
I understand.
Take Game Crafter and then their game ends up getting made later.
Yeah.
Because it's good. And there is no harm in that. My friend Adam Dalton, I did a game, like the third game I ever published was called Ninja Camp. And this is the guy that did the Fall of the Mountain King, and he's published, he's doing great stuff. And when I first approached him, Ninja Camp was this game. I think it was called Guild of Thieves or Den of Thieves or something like that. And I was like, well, we'd like to take your game and publish it. He's like, well, I already did. I'm like, oh, you did? And he's like, yeah, I just made a game on Game Crafter and made some copies for my friends. And
why do you want it?
That's it. No, I respected the crap out of him for that because he accomplished his goal. His goal was to design something, and he did it, and he did it himself, and then that was it. And I think that that's a really powerful lesson.
Those are now worth like $400 on eBay, by the way.
Maybe. I saw one the other day at Half Price Books for like $10, so I don't know if that's true.
I mean, I'm saying after this conversation.
Oh yeah. But there's no. It's not a loss for you to say like, oh, I came up with a cool idea. Isn't that like, what was that Jeremiah Acevedo, the Sardines game? He made like a small print run and that thing ended up getting picked up and like it's like a game that people like legit want now. And it started off with him just having an idea and doing something humble for himself or in a more realistic manner, and then it found its way to its audience.
Sure.
So don't just assume like you're going to make a game, run a Kickstarter, take a bunch of people's money, manufacture something in a foreign country, ship it across, deal with, strangers all over the world, and that is going to work out great for you because it's very different than designing a game.
Know your weakness.
You know
what I ask most publishers, if not every publisher, when they're trying to introduce a game to me? Because you get pitched games to publish. I get pitched games to cover. And when I'm talking on the phone to a designer, new designer, old designer, whatever it is, established, I don't care, I say, what do you like about your game? Tell me about it. Tell me the framework. What's it play best at? And then I say, what's not working with your game? What don't you like? What will people... And I expect an answer. Because games are not right for everyone. And when someone just says, honestly, player counts 1 through 8 are great, and I really don't see much weakness in any version of my game, and everyone I've ever played with has just loved it. It's literally the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, I really like sliced bread. I doubt what you're saying. I'd trade Gloomhaven for sliced bread. I'm going to be honest about that.
Yeah.
Sliced bread, man.
You could use the map tiles as bread.
I'm just saying. Here's the thing. You should know your weaknesses. You should, before you're reaching out to publishers, before you're hitting the print, before you're launching on Kickstarter, know what people are going to criticize you about, have playtested enough to make decisions around what criticisms you're keeping in the game, because some are worth staying. Hey, it plays a little long. Yeah, but that's because we added 16 mechanics that make it really crunchy and good. You just wait for an extra 30 seconds when someone else takes their turn in the 8th round of the game. That's okay. That's good. That's a fine criticism. But it does make it wrong for some people. Yeah, that's just a thing. That's just one of those marks that as a content creator I expect people to know, and if they don't, it's a little warning sign for me.
No, I think that's totally fair. That ties into some other stuff we're talking about too. What number are we on?
I haven't been following the numbers. What number are you on?
I don't know. I think I'm on 9 or 10.
I mean, you're going in order, right?
Yeah, but I did some ad-libbing.
I did too, and then I started jumping.
And I also couldn't read.
And I wrote 4 more down, so I went to 14 at some point.
The top. Yeah. You should just do Mobius
top
strip.
27. Honestly, the thumbnail that just says "No one needs your mediocre game" is going to get more clicks than whatever number we put in front of it.
Are you quoting me on that one?
I mean, it's in the video.
I got in trouble for that.
I am putting that on.
That's fine.
That's 100%. It's
Call
the
back.
best quote I could ever find.
I think
I'll say I said it though, because I also believe it.
Yeah, I mean, well, no, it's true. I mean, I don't look at a lot of game submissions anymore, to be honest. I've only looked at, I think, 2 games since 2018 because the companies I've worked with it's just easier to internally design. I mean, Simon has tons of talented designers. We don't need outside help.
So I've got one. I've got 2 that I'd really like to note. How much more do you have? You got 2 more on there?
I think I've got 1.
1 more. So let me do one of mine.
Okay.
Then you do your last one, and then I'll finish it
Sandwich.
up. Yeah, we'll
Jesse's
sandwich. We'll do the sandwich.
Oh,
stuff.
no, I'm the sandwich.
My middle name's Samuel, so that's really apropos.
That's like sandwich.
It's close. Yeah, it's close. Okay. Talk. You mentioned, and I wrote this down after you mentioned it, that you will just brainstorm something and keep it in your head for a period of time. And there's actually a psychological principle around that. If you are starting a New Year's resolution and you go on camera or you call up your grandmother and you say, Grandma, I'm going to start eating better and I'm going to work out every day and I'm going to lose 30 pounds. Your brain gets the endorphin rush that your body should give it as you lose that weight in response to you stating, I am going to do this thing. It feels really good to tell people what you're going to accomplish, and that is alone enough to remove the motivation for you to accomplish it. So, if you have a game design, if you're watching to this point in the video, I suspect you do not, I challenge you, and trust me, I challenge you because it will help you do something real. Do not tell a single soul. Do not mention it. Don't write it in a comment. Don't share it with your brother. Don't tell people what you want to do or your idea, because the moment you do, you've gotten the reward you wanted for doing it, and it'll make your brain satisfied enough that it won't do the hard labor of creating. Live with it until you cannot stand it, and then create it. And once you bridge that gap, then you can start talking about it, because the hard work, which is the beginning process, has already been done. So, that's my advice.
Whoa, so I was doing it right?
Absolutely.
All along?
Psychologically, you were doing it 100% right.
Wow.
Do not, for the life of it, if you actually want to create something and be successful in it, in this creative space, do not talk about it. Don't do it. You'll undermine yourself.
Silence is science.
It's important.
My last one.
Unless you come up with one on the spot, you know.
It was to prepare for any outcome. Right.
What do you mean by that?
You have to be okay with the idea that you might fail.
Yeah.
I mean, I said this to you earlier, like, you don't get to decide if you're popular. When you do anything that's made for public consumption, the public decides. I was a musician before this. The public decided if I had a song that people liked. Sometimes they would like a song that I was like, this is like our worst song. I'm like, and like, oh, and that would be the song that people thought was the best song. So I think you have to be, 1, prepared to fail. 2, you have to be prepared to pivot. I used to work at a Magic the Gathering card shop that's also sold Pokemon cards. And this guy, the owner, he was rich because this is back when like you could sell boxes of Pokemon for like hundreds to $1,000s or whatever. And
It's coming back, you know that.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah.
That scarcity?
Pokemon scene is ripe.
So what was interesting was he told me, and this was a piece of advice he gave me when I was 19 years old. He said, I opened a sports card store and I wanted to like offer this high level of praising and all this. And he's like, and then one day the distributor told me about Pokemon and I ordered some and then I sold out of it. And then I ordered some more and I sold out of it. And then no one could get it. And then I started figuring out ways to get it. And the next thing I knew, I made $200,000 off of Pokemon cards. And he's like, it's not the business I set out to do, but it's the business that worked. And so I did. Sure. I let it be what it is.
Sure.
And that's true of even in the design process. Like sometimes, the game might not be what you want it to be. Maybe you want it to be a crunchy Euro, and the next thing you know, you've got like a midweight game.
Yeah.
And it's a good midweight game. So, I don't know. I be prepared for any outcome. I think, and that could involve like the thing that you're making changes. That could involve that you're going to fail. That could involve that you're monumentally successful. But don't go in with expectations. That's where all stress comes from. Expectations.
My last piece of advice is going to be on player aids and rulebooks.
Oh.
Every game needs a player aid. And I would argue every game, even at the prototype stage, needs a player aid. Do not ignore this essential part of your game design. I do not know how games nowadays get published without a good player aid as a resource. Along with that, to those publishers that were just curious of this conversation because Travis is a king and wanted to watch to this point, you should be printing player aids for everyone plus. If you want to get brownie points in your game, Travis, please promise me this. When you print this game, give me enough player aids that I can have front and back myself, please.
There's 4 sets.
I'm just saying.
When I went to Office Depot, we only had 2 sets, and that was one of the reasons I printed was another, so we had the full player count.
I'm just clarifying. I want enough that every player can have all the information.
You don't want to share it, and it's inside of the rulebook?
It's sharing's an option, but I highly recommend not doing it. Because it is maybe 8 more cards that you need to print, and I guarantee you, myself and the other thousands of people who are hobbyist gamers that love games will admire and appreciate that little gesture.
You can have it.
I'm just saying. It's so to me essential. Good quality player aids that are enough that everyone at least has their own copy, and I advocate that everyone can have all the information flat in front of them. That's my stance. Paired with that, I believe rulebooks should be read by a lot of people and owned by one. I think you need someone who is a literary expert who is doing the final pass and has final say on every word of text in the rulebook. I think you should have it proofread, not as a block, but page by experienced proofreaders, because in one page you will find so much information, whereas if I just tried to go through card by card or through 60 pages of rules, it's all going to blur within me. Proofread by individuals, page by page, but then owned by a single person who has taken responsibility for all 60 pages and knows that the language makes sense and ties together, and no one makes changes after they sign off.
That's the worst part of my job.
Tell me about it.
Rulebooks.
Tell me about it. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for companies to include rulebooks?
Well, I think a big part of it is it's creator bias, right? So when we were doing the proofing just on this round of stuff, I discovered an effect in there. I was like, hey, to the co-designer, to Mike, I was like, hey, does this mean this? He's like, yeah, but I go, but that's not what it says.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but that's what it's supposed to say. So just change it. I'm like, there's literally no way to say this that conveys the actual rules. I can't think of a way. And I think verbiage is super important to establish early. A lot of people are like, oh, we'll just worry about it at the end and you prove it. No. You don't want, there's a lot of weird stuff in game design. Like, for example, you have life, but you take damage. Mm-hmm. It's 2 different words to describe one metric and the relationship.
Instead of you have life, but you lose life.
Yeah, exactly. I attack you to deal you damage.
3 damage, which
lowers your life. So it's numerous terms that they're obvious, but they're really it's really kind of ridiculous, right?
Or instead of attack and defense could also be one of those references where that one makes more sense because in our mind it just makes sense.
Sure.
But it's not plus attack minus attack or whatever. It's
deal 3 attack.
Yeah.
Right? Prevent 3 attack.
Yeah.
Shield 3 attack.
Yeah.
So I think verbiage is massively important. I've worked with a lot of designers as a developer, and I try to cultivate that habit. And that's another one of those things that goes in that spreadsheet. That's an opportunity to practice improving. Verbiage. Because there's going to come a time when you have to unify all that stuff, and if you wait to the last minute, woo!
Yeah, I think some people underestimate how important it is. I think that's super good advice to establish verbiage early on and keep it consistent. But then I think, like I said, every page should be proofread by a different person or give a person disparate pages. And then the final pass, there should be one individual. And it's one of the reasons why, who's the guy that does, the rules guy that does amazing, Paul Grogan? It's one of the reasons why I think Paul Grogan does so well, is because he's established himself enough that once people send him the rule book, he knows what to do with it, and he signs off Paul Grogan's rule book and ships it back to them. And it shouldn't be touched beyond that. And I think publishing houses should have that in studio. They should have one individual who, final pass comes here, and I sign my name to the back of that rule book, and I'm certifying that everything matches up.
Yeah, like a gold standard type thing.
Yeah.
Industry standard. Yeah, that's interesting. We don't have anything like that.
No, not even close. The problem we have is I've heard a lot of rule books that have had tactical errors because someone was editing on an old copy or an old version, or some 3 people were doing a proofread,
Sure.
and they caught a term, and one changed it here, and the other changed it here, and they no longer match.
I think like Wingspan, the first printing, every instance of the word between was like BETWEEEN. It's really easy, and like find replace, people can go into a cell. I've had it where I go into a spreadsheet and I go, whoa, there's nothing in this cell. Well, where is it? And I'm like, oh, well, the illustrator was in there and you gave him editing rights and he hit spacebar by accident. So that's another thing with your spreadsheets. Make sure you know the difference in editing and view rights.
Cool.
Ta-da!
That's my list. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully this has been informative and interesting. Remember, grab me that cover here for the people that watched this point. At this point, Game Trayz and Quackalope and this guy over here, I think have earned at least your interest in Forsaken, which is coming to Kickstarter soon, and you should find out more about it here on the channel. They're already going to watch. I don't know who I'm talking to.
I hope
like,
so.
The people at this point are in.
You think?
They're in. There's like 7 of them, and one of them's Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
The game is fun.
It's good. It's real fun.
I didn't want to stop when we did
No.
the little half.
I felt bad stopping at an hour, but we never would have filmed this if we hadn't. We did a whole Patreon, like, exclusive first look at the game, for the record.
Which means you should
Go to Patreon?
Yeah.
Jeff's already a Patreon member, though.
He is?
Yeah, he is.
He's such a sweetie.
He's spying on me.
He's a sweetie.
That's what it is. He's not a sweetie. He's just spying.
It's a drone. Is that what that noise is outside? It's a drone?
It might be. Yeah, I'm into it, though. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.